Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of the X Button, Season 4, Episode 10. I am your host, Alejandro, and today, no one's with me. So, this will be my first solo episode for 2024. Kind of like how I did a solo episode back in 2023 when I lost like a huge chunk of a recording I did with my co-host Paul and guest Sebastian. And this week, no one was available. And I knew that could happen sometime, but the good thing is that since I already did a solo episode that one time, I knew that if push came to shove, I could try to do one solo, and this can also help me because I usually am really good with being able to bounce off from one person to the next, but let's see how I do again by just doing it by myself. And last time it was just kind of like a recap episode, plus a few things that I've been playing, and today's just going to be like a more meatier, more traditional episode of the show, but just with me. So thank you for joining me today as I do this solo episode for you guys so that we don't miss an episode. And just kind of like as a little housekeeping thing, next Monday I'm gonna be recording a spoiler cast with Paul. Obviously he couldn't be here today because kind of like we have mentioned before, with his upcoming parenthood and just work being more hectic to him, he's kind of coming in and out, like every 1 week in, 1 week out. He couldn't do 2 weeks in a row this week, but next week I'm going to be recording a spoiler cast for the game that we have been playing a lot. I'm definitely going to be talking about that later, and that's going to be next week's episode, and I can't wait to record that with him, especially because he already beat the game and I'm very close to doing it. So yeah, definitely look forward to that. And without any more preamble, just reminder that this is the X Bottom Podcast, our gaming podcast that posts every Fridays from 10 a.m. onwards, God willing, available in the YouTube channel Escape Gaming, as well as most audio services around the world, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the like. You can find links in the RSS feed at tinyurl.com/escapegaming. If you enjoy our show, give us a like and subscribe. So, the said game that we're going to be recording a spoiler cast on is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which we gave our initial impressions last week after like a few hours of, after the first many hours of me playing through it. I think last week I was already like in chapter 8, going into chapter 9 if I remember correctly, and Paul was still kind of like early at end of chapter 6 into chapter 7, and obviously like since that week, Paul actually like overtook me because he just kept mainlining and he already beat it. This is the kind of game that's like crack cocaine for me, unfortunately, because it's like when you make a world that appeals to me like this one does, and you do the checklist activities like this game does in a good way, like kind of like when obviously I mentioned it last week, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a lot of its structure is like a clear inspiration from Ubisoft style open world games. And obviously like I've clowned many times how overused that formula has been, but it also made me realize that when a game is super fun, even if it's under that same structure, like I don't care too much if the structure is like very like tried and true, when the underlying game is just so entertaining and so engrossing. And that's just been that game for me. Is like this game, like as of right now, I have now 100%ed every chattily activity for this game, and so you have like 6 regions, even though I think there's an ocean that opens very, very late in the game, like the ocean in between the 2 continents, and you can kind of like ride a ship there. Apparently there's stuff to do in the ocean too, so maybe I could also 100% that area too, but at least from like the 6 main biomes, I got 100% in everything. I did every single activity. I did every tower. I did every proto-relic quest. And I have 115 hours based on my clock. And I know that clock is accurate because when you pause the game, after like 3 minutes, it just stops. So it's like I know I have not just run off the clock. The fact that I'm already 45 hours over what I did for Final Fantasy 16 last year, and I still want to keep playing. I still have a few side quests that I haven't completed that I'm definitely going to complete. It just tells me that, at least for me, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is an all-timer. It's like it's just been... I'm so glad that I was so highly anticipated. I was so highly anticipating this game ever since like I became a Final Fantasy believer after I finished Crisis Core and then reviewing Final Fantasy 16 and going through those older games and beating that first game for the first time last year, and just kind of like the magic moment of getting to experience so much of that game, like at this level of fidelity, and at the level that they have fleshed out not just the tiny stories from the different areas that you go, but also the character interactions that now at this point in time, I think it will be very hard to argue that the cast of Final Fantasy VII is not the best cast of characters on a Final Fantasy game. And of course, there's been many, and I mean many games in this franchise that has old timers in this cast of characters. I mean, just the mere experience in 4 and 6, that cast of characters was just so phenomenal too. And I obviously also have a very personal love for the 16 cast, even though I know that any love for 16 kind of can be like taken with a grain of salt, depending on you being willing to accept that game as such a departure from what you want out of Final Fantasy. But what Rebirth has done has just been so has endeared me so much to this sub-series now, that obviously the love for Final Fantasy VII is already very documented at this point. I mean, from them showing the tech demo back in 2005 at the Sony E3 press conference, the begging a lot of fans have had for Square Enix to remake this game that back in 97 was the game that solidified the PlayStation brand and introduced JRPGs to so many people. And to the point that its reuse of characters in even franchises like Kingdom Hearts like solidify like the people's love for Cloud, Sephiroth, Aerith, Yuffie, Cid, all of those characters. And seeing them do it so well now in this remake, now duology, and going into like a third entry, that I can't like gush this enough. Like I am really, especially right now, I'm getting close to getting done based on like what Paul has told me. If I just mainline through after I'm done with all the side quests that I want to do, and I just can't imagine anything happening in that final third of the game that would prevent this from being like my all-time favorite Final Fantasy game. Like, and I know how much I love this because I replayed Final Fantasy VII Remake and played for the first time Intergrade right before I played Rebirth. I put 37 hours into Remake, and by the end of Remake, I was feeling very exhausted because I did kind of like a really full sort of completionist run of Remake, and there's just something about it that the highs of Remake are really high. If there's one thing that I'm definitely gonna give Remake the leg up over Rebirth, is more in the main plot, kind of like at least from like a plot main story perspective. There's something about the Midgar section of that game that creates a really clear arc that allowed Square Enix to do like a clear middle, beginning, end to be able to make like a full game, even though then they had to resort to very tricky shenanigans to try to fill up a full 30 to almost 50 hour game from a section that in the original could go from 3 to 5 hours depending on how much you interacted with that section of Midgar back in the original game. So I felt more the padding in that game than I did in Rebirth. The fact that I'm 115 hours in with this game, I've been playing it non-stop. I have stopped playing it, especially I'm gonna talk with 2 games that I kind of stopped playing just to kind of try them out for experience reasons, but I have not stopped playing this game. It's just been like engaging with everything with Rebirth, from all its damn mini games that I've done like almost everything now. I've done every mini game, I've gotten every high score with those mini games. Yesterday I finished completing the Queen's Blood card game, and the ending of the card game, the final like opponent was so damn hard that I feel like I aged trying to like figure out a strategy to beat that cheating bastard. And just the satisfaction I get to like the endless variety that is in this game, that even though you could make the argument that going through the 6 different how do I say this, the 6 different areas and doing the Chatley quests, there's so many side activities that just repeat, kind of like doing the towers. It's repeatable in all 6 areas. The combat challenges where you fight like a monster in the world and then having to figure out like doing the 3 objectives where you fight with the monsters, and sometimes they ask you, yeah, you should stagger them, you should pressure them, try to kill them before the timer runs out. And sometimes it will be other side activities be like, yeah, kill this enemy without you getting petrified or transform into a frog or things like that. As like I didn't mind doing those combat challenges because it taught me more about the really complex combat system of this game, that the more I played it and understand the synergy systems, how they mix with the different combinations of characters and when to properly do a synergy attack, like the ones that I have one that I do with Cloud and Tifa, that when I do it, it gives me infinite magic for like a little time, that then I can just spam strong magic like Firagas, Blizzagas, Thundagas, that usually cost like from 18 to 22 magic points, and I do them, I get to spam them and they just cost 0. So I can just like do spam and spam and spam, and then that can give me the leg up, especially when you do some of the combat challenges with really tanky enemies. And then I have other kind of synergies, like I have one with Aerith that she does like a magic. There's 2 magic attacks that she does with a sword. There's the one that you do with R1 that is kind of like the quick synergy attacks that you can like spam and it doesn't cost anything. They have one that keeps me magic to the sword for like a strong attack, but then they do the synergy like ability that goes into like the little cutscene that it's also like a strong sword, but then like ups my limit breaks to like level 2 to be able to do like stronger attacks if I get to fill up the limit break, which obviously, like, if you played Final Fantasy, not the re-releases of 7 and 8 on modern consoles where you can like click the right stick to enable a limit break through like a cheat code. Limit breaks, you fill up those meters sometimes, depending on the upgrade system that you have like pursued, that sometimes like with Cloud, for example, if you do like a perfect parry or you effectively block an enemy, that fills up your limit gauge. But the thing is that sometimes limit gauges only fill up if you keep getting hit by enemies. So these are kind of like the quote-unquote last-ditch effort attacks to be able to do massive damage to an enemy if you're kind of like on a losing streak. And there's ways to fill up that meter without just you getting hit. So there's like different layers of strategy that me doing the combat activities of the world really like made me get more comfortable with the depth of the system. And this is absolutely the best combat system for Final Fantasy. And I love 16. I've said that many times. I really love the action tinge of that game. It's Devil May Cry style combat like being put into the series. What they did with the Rebirth is definitely a more entertaining combat system for me, because on top of how different every character feels, getting to nail the strategy with each of them, it just adds extra variety. Where in 16, you're just playing as Clive. So that helped me complete all these combat activities from Chatterley. Even though, like, if you want to boil it down, it's still just combat activities. So it's like there's like this different schism in my mind between like me objectively understanding that they do a lot of repeated side activities with the Chatterley stuff, but how fun it is to engage with those activities has made me like not like I can't really complain myself of me engaging like how fun the combat is, the fact that I'm just still doing the same stuff, even though there's still like some activities within the Chatterley quest, especially the Proto Relic quest. That's where the variety comes from, the different biomes that you go. Like every Proto Relic quest, you do something completely different. Sometimes it's minigame based or something, or maybe like a combat challenge, or you get tiny flashbacks that are really effective in like one of the later biomes. That if you would want to at least get the most meaningful variety out of the Chatterley stuff, I would recommend you do Proto Relics. Even if you don't engage with the towers and the other combat systems, beyond just wanting to like check off the box and build up enough Chatterley points for you to buy materia. That I tell you, some of the materia that you can buy from Chatterley is very, very effective. Like if you're a fan of Crisis Core, that's where you get jump. Or even if you played some of the older Final Fantasies, like Final Fantasy IV, Kain, the Dragoon doing his jump ability, you can get that ability through Chatterley, and sometimes the only way to do that is just engaging in that side stuff. So there's at least something worth doing. There's like, it's not just checking a checkbox, kind of like many Ubisoft games that it's just about completing for the sake of completing. They had given structure to this structure basically, and that at least helped push me to do everything. And it's very easy with my kind of like OCD completionist mind that if one of these hits so well, it just hits. So I can't wait to talk more about it. There's just so much about like what happens story-wise. And I will say this, because this was a criticism that Paul had, and I have heard other people mention it, and I will give some validity to it. Rebirth had an interesting task ahead of it, because they basically made an entire game out of the 2/3 of disc 1. Basically, if you have played the original game, And during that time when you're playing the original game, after you're done with the Midgar section that is basically kind of like its own arc and kind of sets you with like the main goal for the rest of the game, which is you basically stopping Sephiroth, a lot of the story in OG Final Fantasy VII around this time was less about a main plot and more about you going through exploring the world of Gaia, going through the different towns and learning kind of like Shinra's influence or non-influence in some of these towns, like something how their hold is so strong in some of these towns, or how tiny little influences they had in a few, and sometimes engaging with some of the tiny stories within those towns, and then sometimes learning more about your crew back then, like or even back then, like there was also the secret stuff, like you getting Yuffie in the original game was like a secret objective that you had to do, and you could entirely miss her. Obviously, they have brought in characters like Yuffie and Vincent, which were optional back in the OG. They're like already part of the story. That part of the story was more about world building and taking the idea of like what Shinra had done in Midgar and how strong their grasp was in that city, and seeing what their influences were around the world as you're kind of like trying to pursue Sephiroth. And if what you want is like main story, the main story didn't really kick back in until you arrived to Cosmo Canyon back in the original one. And very similarly, after the Golden Saucer part of this game, which is around chapter 8, that's when you start getting more meaningful like plot progression. And around that time, you have already connected with many of your characters now. And I feel like, shockingly, even though the tagline at the end of Remake was like, the unknown journey continues, which suggested that whatever you were going to be doing with Rebirth was going to be completely different from what following the events of the original would have been. What's so funny is that, very similar to Remake, a lot of the structure of this game is still following the almost point-to-point, beat-to-beat like follow-throughs of the original game. Obviously, a little bit more fleshed out. Sections that would take like 10 minutes in the original game have been like blew up to like an entire hour, like the Mithril Caves that you go in early on. But it's like at the very least, it definitely feels more like a reimagined remake that still kind of follows some sort of structure from the original, more than I was anticipating, because I kind of was expecting them to be a completely fresh thing based on the implications of the end of Remake. So it's kind of like they're still trying to toy around with the idea that they're still following the structure, but they still kind of want to do the same thing. And I would say that at the very least, them doing the unknown, kind of like the unknown journey, like tagline, how they did it is that the fact that even though you were probably following the same structure, at least you have something in the back of your mind that there's always a chance that you don't know how things may go, or if they're gonna be like the exact same way as the original game, which there are parts that are just like that. If you know about the dolphin, I'm so happy that they were able to include the dolphin and under Junon, kind of like the original one. But or even just flesh out some stuff that happens around the same time that they would happen back in the original one. And then you get some story interspersed. That's where you kind of get some of the new stuff, and that's the thing that I always find really intriguing, because it comes in at the right times, and it always kind of like makes me question. So what's the point of like what they're adding? And based on what Paul told me, because he already finished it, that eventually like makes sense in the end. So I can't wait to experience that in the final few chapters. And I know like for him, he's definitely gonna like expand his thoughts on the spoiler cast that we record, but his opinion completely turned around for Rebirth. Like obviously he was iffier, like he liked it. He mentioned it last week that for him this was still a solid 9, but he still had some preservations about the fact that he approached it more from a story perspective. And I actually kind of talked about this more. He had the advantage, quote unquote, or kind of like the benefit that his wife came off sick, so he had to take care of his wife, and that allowed him to stay home and work from home, and he got to play this game in bigger chunks. And this has been something that I also have been talking with the seasoned gaming people that have also been playing, and also some of the comments that I've heard from Richard Ho from Hoglaw, who's a big Final Fantasy fan, that he put out a hot take on Twitter that I actually took big umbrage on. Especially because I know he loves Final Fantasy VII, so to me it was weird seeing him saying this, but I kind of understand it more. Like, I have not had a small session with Rebirth. Every time that I play Rebirth, I played for hours and hours. like maybe 5 to 6 hours a day, which is wild. Some of these other people that I've been talking to, they sometimes only get 1 hour to be able to play. I can't imagine where like how distracting the game can be with its mini games and side content and the curiosity of trying to just embrace this world and not seeing too much like plot progression. That can get really frustrating, especially where this is located in the original game and what story or not story there was there, because it was more like inwards character focused. This is definitely a game that I told Paul that your enjoyment can be more pronounced if you can like set aside like a lot of hours to just like bite huge chunks out of this game. Obviously, there's criticism to be had to be like, couldn't they have made something that could still feel satisfying just to play and make like tiny progress? But that's kind of hard for me to really see because I've just been so enamored that I just keep playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it. Just yesterday, on top of finishing the Queen's Blood card game, I did all the Chocobo races, and I really got to dive in and how well the racing mechanics are for this game for the Chocobo races, that I was like, yeah, it's like this. I could imagine them doing like a Chocobo kart or Chocobo racing game and having the same mechanics and be like, yeah, this like it feels solid as a racing game, and they have all these races. I did all of them, like all back to back. I found that really entertaining, kind of as a as a side activity to do. Obviously, there's even more side activities that you can do within the Golden Saucer. There's like a ship mini game that I haven't gone back to see if there's like more levels to do, because they mentioned when you hit a specific chapter late in the game that more activities open up. So that's what I found shocking. I was at 99 hours by the time I got to like chapter 12, and then you got hit with like a big splash, be like, there's more side quests, more activities, more Queen's Blood. I was like, this is insane how much content they were able to put out in this game. And the fact they were able to do all of this in 3 to 4 years. People really are not ready to to grasp just how huge Rebirth is as an open world. To the point that if you had told me that this took like I think I mentioned it last week, if you had told me this took 7 to 8 years to make, I would have believed you, because that's kind of the size of this thing. Like, I feel like this rivals something like even Witcher 3, and that was also one of the biggest like open world landmasses. And I know that Naoki Yamaguchi and some of the team has said that they took inspiration from both Witcher 3 and Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West, and how they like scoped the open world and how they structure some of these side quests. And I'll definitely say that even though there's just 1 or 2 stinker side quests here and there, I would say that at least from a side quest perspective, especially because I did a lot of the ones from FF16. In fact, for my review, I did an entire like 100 completionist run for 16 based on me playing it post-launch. So I was like, might as well do it. I'm not under embargo. And there were so many side quests in 16 that were so banal, that were so worthless. And once in a while, you would get hit with one that I was like, damn it, this is Russian roulette. I will try to trudge through some of the less than stellar side quests to really get into the good ones. And I feel like the ratio of really great side quests and rewarding side quests of Rebirth is completely different from FF16, where you get the majority of them feel great, and then you're gonna be hit with a few that are like, okay, this feels kind of grindy. There's like a very late side quest you do that's from Costa del Sol, that you would have to go hunt 2 animals to get 2 of their resources to like build a bait to fight like some crocodiles. And that was the only one that I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, this was definitely feel more fetchy than usual. But I feel what they do story wise and how these side quests are all tied to the different characters, that helps a lot, because it's building your party, it's building your relationship. I mentioned this to the Season Gaming guys. I feel like the game this reminds me the most is Mass Effect 2. And why it reminds me the most is that if you look at the Mass Effect trilogy holistically, like plot wise, Mass Effect 2 is probably the lightest one when it comes to plot, because there's only one main thrust for that game in Mass Effect 2, and it was stop the collectors by going on your suicide mission at the end of the game. And what you do in the majority of that game is you just build your party and build a loyalty to your party so that you have like a strong enough team to take on that suicide mission. And then like it's so funny how despite having the lightest plot, a lot of people think Mass Effect 2 is the best Mass Effect, because what they did with characters and the character interactions and their loyalty quests and things like that was like, that carried the brunt of that game. And it was so expertly well written. You got more connected to each characters that you got to recruit in your party, that even like characters that were part of your party in the first Mass Effect got extra depth with the loyalty quest that you did in that you did in Mass Effect 2. So because Rebirth, again, I mentioned, it's kind of like in this awkward spot in the later content of that first disc that's more about world building, that allowed Square Enix to really like fill up the parts that are more plot light with all the side quests that you do with like for the different worlds and cities that you visit, and how that ties in to your party. And because this is already the most charming cast of characters out of Final Fantasy, that aids so much in it's still feeling like a really fulfilling experience in the end for me. So that's why I've been so pleased. Like, as you can already hear, it's like I've just been so pleased with this game. It's like I'm really trying to hold off and just sounding too fanboyish and giving this thing like a 10 out of 10, because it's like in the amount of time that I played this, the last game that had me this enchanted to play in long chunks and not regretting that was last year's The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So I want to see how the current call is for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but so far I'm so glad that finally the most anticipated game that I had in a given year feels like could be for real like my favorite game of the year. Even though I already said that I'm kind of like open to I have an open mind to think other games can come in and maybe surpass it. Who knows? Like, I know a lot of people are really high for Dragon's Dogma 2. I would love to be surprised too, but it's like I can't wait to talk more about this game on the spoiler cast. And especially, I'm glad that Paul eventually turned the corner, and it really took him being able to like really play this for hours and hours and hours and hours to really immerse himself in the world, instead of like him. Unfortunately, he's more of a traditional 9-to-5 worker compared to me, that I'm more self-employed work from home person that allows me more time to play stuff and handle work kind of like simultaneously. So I kind of get it, but at the end he did said that he loved this game more than Remake, and that's definitely where I am, even though I feel Remake is still really strong with a couple issues. So definitely look forward to a spoiler cast next week for that, even if you're haven't finished it. I will try to keep it spoiler free, at least half of it, and then we're just gonna go full on spoilers, because there's so many story moments for this game that I can't wait to gush about, especially some story moments that had me tearing up like with just joy. There's some really fantastic moments, and I'll just say they live this in. If you were a fan of Final Fantasy VI's opera scene, there's something they do that to me was like gave me the same feelings as that opera scene. So yeah, so that's it for me with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But then we got there was other two games that I got to play. One because Travis Northup from IGN, he hit me up because he needed help with a review. In fact, I was gonna help him review the new South Park game that's coming soon, South Park Snow Day. But then he basically got told if he wanted to also review a game that came out the same week in early access. That was Tribes 3 Rival. So basically, Tribes is a PC. It's a PC series that it's more like arena shooter, a capture the flag. From what I understand, that's kind of not my realm. But I was like, yeah, I'll help you with this one. And we played that for a couple hours on Tuesday. I was taking a little break from Rebirth after doing that aforementioned side quest. I mentioned that I was like, okay, this is the first one that felt a little fetchy with trying to fight these two monsters and all that. And yeah, we played for like a few hours, and I would say the movement of that game is immaculate. If you have played a game like Apex Legends, that was one of the few recent battle royale / arena shooters that really emphasized the whole slide down a slope, or slide down downhill. If there's like a slope downhill for you to like get momentum, Tribes 3 is basically that taken to the upteenth level. And when you really get into the flow of knowing when you slide down the slope and then kick in your jetpack, there's just something really fun about the movement. Even though the chaotic level of that movement makes it really frustrating to engage in combat with some of the enemies, especially for a 32v32 shooter, that it can get like some of these enemies are too fast. They're too damn fast, and I could barely like sneak in a few kills per match. Also because I was kind of playing mouse and keyboard, because that game has really poor mouse controller support. So it took some adjustment, but yeah, it's an arena shooter. Definitely, I totally get why people say that mouse and keyboard is the place to play an arena kind of shooter. the one that's not too reliant on ADS and things like that, because it's like eventually kind of got into the flow, and it was really fun. It was a really fun time to play. The only problem, and I think you can go read Travis's review in progress already down over at IGN, is that it's very, very content light. It's like there's only one mode. You can basically see all the maps like within like an hour of play. So again, and he's so funny. His tagline was something like a fun arena shooter that runs out of gas, and he put it as gas as GAAZ or GAS as a games as a service. And again, kind of like typical with games as a service multiplayer style shooter, is like it always is nowadays. Launch one with free content, and then we're gonna like put a roadmap that we're gonna add content over time. So hope you stay around for the ride when we probably add another map within a week or two, or however long it takes. Or kind of like Suicide Squad that was adding Joker at the end of March, and at such dismal player counts over on PC. I don't know, like yeah, games as a service are always weird. Like sometimes one of those will always hit, but at least for that one, I think you can buy the early access right now for $18. It has weird monetization where they have like a microtransaction, 2 separate $40 annual passes for you to get cosmetics. But in order for you to get those cosmetics, you have to kind of log in once every 24 hours. So it feels like give a lot of money up front and then calculate your time. So you're always logging in every 24 hours to get any one new skin each time. And that feels very artificial and feels kind of gross how much they're charging for the annual pass, considering how cheap it is to get into the game. You can buy in for $18. So yeah, his review is definitely gonna go live maybe something later today. I think he asked if we were gonna play again today, but we may be moving into that South Park game soon. So that should be a fun one. It's been fun getting to play with him and helping him with multiplayer stuff, like I did with Skull and Bones, which I did like people already saw. I already did a review for that one. He definitely makes fun of the fact that I played a lot of that game solo, and because he always plays live service games multiplayer, and I'm like, I played a lot of live service shooters solo and I've enjoyed them. So it's like, to me, that's no excuse for Skull and Bones to feel so vapid if you're playing solo, but it's obviously so much better if you're playing with like a crew. But to me, kind of like how I see live service games that allow you to play them solo, a lot of them you can do the initial content by yourself, and most of them know how to make that content good. Like, let's look at the Witch Queen campaign. I finished the Witch Queen campaign for Destiny 2 years ago solo, and it was one of the best things that I played that year. And obviously then you pair up with people to do the end game stuff like raids and all of that. I feel that should be the ratio. It's like, yeah, try to make a game that obviously is fun. It's definitely fun if you play with people, that if you can't find a crew to play, at least you can have some fun early on in what should be your campaign stuff. And then when you're in end game stuff, that's what's clear. Be like, okay, to really succeed in end game, find a team. I feel like Skull and Bones like really with the ball in making a fun game that you couldn't engage solo. So, and he loves making fun of it. Yeah, Travis is fun, so I let him make fun of me in a way. So, and then the other game that I tried briefly yesterday because it unlocked yesterday night. I was like, I miss this game so much, even though I had them on Xbox. But kind of like the idea of these games coming back, like with online, in something that I never did back in the day, were the Battlefront games, the pandemic Battlefront games from 2004 and 2005. And when that was announced at the last Nintendo Direct, and they were so imminent, I was like, oh wow, I cannot believe that those classics from my childhood. And if you are a long-time listener and listen to the very emotional episode 53 we recorded in 2022, The Games That Made Us, where me and Paul went over what were our favorite associated games for every system. Like, Battlefront 2 was my favorite game on the PS2, even though I know there are games that were so much better, like the God of War duology, Shadow of the Colossus, and Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, things like that. I have such high association memories of just endlessly playing Battlefront 2 in the tail end of the PS2 era for me. So it was like anything to like re-scratch the itch on a system that I play more, even though I could play on back compat on Xbox. I own those games on back compat. I was like, yeah, let's see how they did. And I'm sad to report that Aspyr, the developer that has been bringing back a lot of these Star Wars games in remaster form, I feel they definitely whiffed it with Star Wars Battlefront Classic in a really heartbreaking way. It feels so bare bones how little options there is to be able to like customize your game. Like, if you're playing on PS5, this is one of those games where the adaptive triggers are already basically enabled, and you cannot unenable them like within the game. You would have to go into the system settings to disable adaptive triggers, and that annoys the shit out of me because there are some games that I feel do the adaptive triggers really well. I feel like a game like Rebirth uses them really well, to me personally, but then like there's some games that just do them so bad, and I hate that those games then don't give an option to like disable it within the game, because I hate having to, okay, every time that I have to play this game now I have to go into the system settings of the controller to disable the adaptive triggers, because it's like they don't feel really good to use, and it also lacks customization. Like for example, if you play Battlefront 2, like the sensitivity to aim in that game is so damn low, way lower than I remember it being from the old game, that you were like, there's no way to like improve sensitivity from what I saw within the in-game options. And I know over on PC things have been more disastrous. They launched the game. Apparently there were 10,000 people wanting to play it last night, and Aspire only enabled 3, no joke, 3 servers. How do you do a game where your big selling point is that you're bringing these games back online to do like 64 player matches, and you barely have server space? And I got to see some of the clips of just rubber banding left and right, and I'm like, God damn it, Aspire! It's like you've just gone worse and worse and worse and worse. It's so sad that Aspire, the studio that has been in charge of bringing all of those classic Star Wars games to modern systems and doing them in a way that, yeah, it's like they feel like minimal viable efforts, but they feel as good enough efforts for you to be able to play those older games on a modern system, like Jedi Outcast, Jedi Academy, the Star Wars Racer. I don't know if they did the Jedi Starfighter game. I wouldn't be surprised if they did also. But it's like they had all of those. They did the KOTOR remake. They were in charge of the KOTOR remake that was coming exclusive to PS5. And before they got removed from the project for undisclosed reasons. I don't know. Apparently they were fumbling the ball. But they also did the KOTOR remasters that you can get on Switch. And they fumbled the ball even extra with KOTOR 2, where they were like, they sold that game with the promise that they were going to do the bonus content that a lot of people modded into the game and make it like an official release. And then they decided to cancel it. So a lot of the reason why a lot of people wanted to buy KOTOR 2 on Switch was gone, because it was like they were sold a bill of goods. So it's like everything that's been happening with Aspire has been so sad, especially when it comes to Star Wars, because they also recently did the Tomb Raider trilogy of the original ones, and that one was done well. I bought it, and I was like, oh wow, this is like a really excellent, this kind of remaster, where it was like, yeah, they definitely sharpened it up, but the art style definitely feels like it calls back to what you remember out of all those old games. But it feels like Star Wars is the thing that now, as it always is with Star Wars, I don't know what it is, that Star Wars is always cursed when it comes to video games. It's a monkey spot when it comes to that franchise, when it comes to games. And now, like, a classic from my childhood, I feel like just playing the campaigns would be like the one thing that kind of works, even though I still feel kind of angry at how little customization you can do within those games. Then I'm like, I saw some of those like hilarious Steam reviews. There's a 21% positive right now. It's like, this is the easiest, this could have been the easiest layup, and you still fumble the ball. So it's like, at $35, if what you want to do with Star Wars Battlefront Classic is play something that harkens back to your childhood and playing it online, I would not recommend it right now, because it feels like it's really problematic online. And this, people, is why you just don't release a game online like without testing it with a beta nowadays. If you see a game that has big online functionality that launches with no beta, 90% of the time it's not going to work at launch. And it definitely didn't work yesterday. It was like I tried to play online the original Battlefront, and it put me quick join didn't work. You needed to find kind of like a server list. I got into a server that was the most full at 10 players. I joined in, and the match was almost over. And then and then when I tried to like load into the next match, the match wouldn't load. It was just kind of like waiting there. It felt like there was like no player to join in the other side of the team, so the game was trying to wait for people to join in. So I was like, sucks. But let's hope crossing fingers that then they eventually like make good with the sport, because fundamentally I love the idea of those classic Battlefront games existing, but I would want them to exist in their best way, best way possible, and this is not it. So hard recommendation for me so far. So that's enough of what I have been playing so far. Obviously, Rebirth has been taking a lot of my time, and I can't wait to see how I've been playing keeps evolving, moving on from Rebirth, because this was the big one for me. So, and my review should be coming soon for that. So, enough of that, because now that Paul's not here, I have a lot of meaty news to go over. So, press X for some news. So let's start with the news batch over at BGC.com. First is story number 1 by Tom Ivan. Apex Legends studio Respawn hit with layoffs as part of wider EA cuts. So the publisher announced a restructuring plan last month that will see it lay off approximately 5% of its global workforce. At the same time, it said it had canceled a Star Wars FPS that had been in development at Respawn. That's the game that we talked a few weeks back that leaked by Insider Gaming to be the Mandalorian game. So the Apex team was hit with layoffs today. Level designer Aaron Stomp wrote on Twitter/X, "It sucks seeing some of the people I worked with for almost 3 years now get let go. Hopefully they land on their feet sooner rather than later. After 20 seasons of Apex and 5 years at Respawn nearly to the day, my job has been made redundant and I have been laid off," said global social media lead Alex Ackerman. "Working on this game and supporting this community has truly been the honor of my career and highlight of my life." Rough day at EA, rough day at Respawn, said Peter Stewart, a senior writer at the studio. "Although I am thankful to be safe, my thoughts are with everyone affected by the ongoing layoffs. And if there's any way I can help or signal boost, I will do. It's really hard to find the energy and joy to make games in this environment." Announcing the cancellation of the Star Wars FPS, EA Entertainment and Technology President Laura Miel said it would allow the studio to focus on new projects based on Respawn's rich library of own brands, in addition to existing series like Star Wars Jedi. Apex Legends players can expect to start seeing the game expand beyond the traditional Battle Royale universe over the coming year as EA looks to attract more players to the franchise, CEO Andrew Wilson said last week. And Respawn is reportedly working on a new game set in the Titanfall universe, as reported by Jeff Grubb, I think it was last week, and we didn't cover it here. It's so sad having to always read almost every day, be like, okay, who got laid off this week? Like, what studio may have gotten closed? And it sucks that for Respawn, the worst part is that they have a massively successful game in Apex Legends that makes a lot of money. It's always in the top 10 most played games any given week. Even though a lot of people don't really talk about Apex, it's just a game that just exists now in perpetuity. And what a volatile time in the industry that is, like, not even them can be safe. The studio that delivered a great game in Jedi Survivor, one of the best-selling games of last year, has a massive ongoing revenue with that, and they still have to get hit with layoffs. And obviously, the canceled Star Wars FPS. One would have expected that there were going to be redundancies happening at that Star Wars FPS game because it was going to be single-player stuff, and they were not going to do that. And but it seems that the ones that got hit with layoffs were from the Apex team, the team that's like your golden goose. It's like such frustrating time in the gaming industry. It's just so sad, and I feel for Respawn. They're EA's current best team, and it's just so funny of them saying, Laura Miel saying that Respawn's rich library of own brands. Their own brands is just Titanfall. And then what they did with Titanfall by spinning off into Apex Legends is still the Titanfall universe. It's like, it's so funny. Like, are they letting Respawn create like something new? Because it's like, if they retreat into like their own stuff, it's like they don't have much. It was just Titanfall. So yeah, it's like EA is always a studio that to me is like one step forward and two steps back. Every time that I'm giving them their flowers, I mentioned in other episodes, like they always do something to step on the rake, and that's just so tiring and so it's just so sucky. At this point, is like this is why like I take more pride in like championing games outside the big three. Well, now the big two, because remember, Activision Blizzard is now owned by Microsoft. By what used to be the Activision, Ubisoft, like EA trifecta of like the big third-party publishers. It's like EA was the one that was doing things right in my eyes, and I don't feel that strong about that. Especially now that they announced that the Jedi game that they're working, the third one will be the last one they do for Star Wars, and they're not gonna do more licensed stuff after their Iron Man and Black Panther game. So it's like, I definitely want to see like what EA ends up doing, because like, they're the experts at just stepping on rakes after building goodwill. So, story number 2. In the opposite of layoffs, this is something that at least I'm glad it's happening under what's happening over the shit show that is Embracer, because they have been like trying to sell stuff off, because obviously they have closed some studios, but they're also trying to sell off stuff so that they don't close. And they can basically confirm the sale this time. Story number 2 by Andy Robinson over at BGC. Embracer confirms 247 million sale of Saber assets and withdraws from Russia. Update: 4A Games and Sen Studios expected to be included in the sale, taking the deal value to 500 million. In an announcement to investors on Thursday, Embracer said the sale meant it would now cease all operations in Russia while improving its cash flow. Saber is being sold to a group of private investors under Beacon Interactive, a company controlled by Saber Interactive co-founder Matthew Karch. In the update, according to Bloomberg, Beacon intends to exercise an option to acquire 4A Games, Metro, and Sen Studios, the pinball guys, which would see the total value of the deal rise to about 500 million. Saber will keep studios Nimble Giant, who made Star Trek Infinite, 3D Realms, the guys that made Iron Fury, Sandbox Strategies, New World Interactive, the guys that made the Insurgency Sandstorm game, Slipgate Ironworks, the guys that made Graven, Madhead Games from the Scars Above game that got dragged through the streets last year, Fractured Byte, the guys that helped make the Borderlands Legendary Collection, and then Embracer will still retain Tripwire, the guys that made Chivalry, Beamdog, the guys that made Mythforce, Tuxedo Labs, the guys that made Teardown, D-Merch, Shiver, the guys that made Lucius, Aspire, the guys that recently made the disastrous Star Wars Battlefront Classic, Snapshot Games, the guys that ported that's Phoenix Point, not Phoenix Wright, and 34 Big Things from Redout. Saber's buyer has also been granted an option right to acquire 4A Games and Sen Studios for a fixed price within a certain time period. That's kind of what we read about with the update. Due to commercial reasons, the parties have agreed not to disclose full terms, Thursday announcement reads. The board of Embracer is, however, confident that the exercise price stipulated in the option right reflects at least the studio's market value and is significantly higher than the current net book value, including goodwill, of USD 81 million, which is SEK 829 million. Long-term license and publishing rights to all current and future PC console games in the Metro franchise are held within the Embracer's PlayOn group. These rights will not change regardless of whether the option rights are exercised, it said. Embracer CEO Lars Wingford said in a statement, "I am pleased that we have found a win-win solution for Embracer and the parts of Saber that now will leave us. This transaction puts both companies in a strong position to thrive going forward. Embracer is now able to discontinue all operations in Russia according to a previous board decision, while safeguarding many developer jobs under new independent ownership. At the same time, we keep key companies, valuable IPs, and future publishing rights. Cash flow is immediately improved, and we remain committed to reducing net debt. The transaction yields additional headroom to amortize debt in accordance with existing bank agreements and will improve financial flexibility. This is the first transaction of the previously mentioned structured processes and marks a small but important step in our journey to transform Embracer into the future for the benefit of all employees, gamers, and shareholders." Saber co-founder Matthew Karch added, "Over the past 4 years, I have been proud to be part of Embracer's amazing transformation into one of the leading game companies in the world. As part of the company's efforts to reorganize for a changed industry and geopolitical challenges, we jointly felt it was the right decision for both Embracer and the core of Saber to part ways. This divestment leaves both parties in much better positions to grow our respective businesses. I will continue to remain a large, long-term shareholder of Embracer, and we will remain partners in several ongoing and future projects. This transaction also safeguards the livelihoods of hundreds of professionals, many of whom I have worked with for over 2 decades. Since last summer, Embracer has been carrying out a widespread money-saving operation, announcing that it was implementing a restructuring plan which would involve the closure of studios and the cancellation of projects. The restructuring resulted in 1,387 job cuts, or about 8% of its global workforce, during the 6 months ended in December. This included cutting 871 internal game developers, 252 internal non-developers, and 264 external developers. Embracer also announced last month that during that 6-month period in 2023, it canceled 29 unannounced games. So, he goes to say, I don't have to remind people of just fuck Embracer, like what they did with just gobbling freaking everything in the industry with like no plan, and then them losing that $2 billion deal that they were trying to do with the Saudi Arabia government, and then when they lost that 2 billion, it meant that they were on complete jeopardy, and then led to closure of like legendary studios like Volition that made that Saints Row games, the original Saints Row games, and I think they also did the Red Faction Guerrilla games, and then like all the people that have lost their job, like what that thing that happened with the Time Splitters 2 team, that they brought in back the original people that worked in Time Splitters to do like a remake or like a revive the Time Splitters franchise, and then they had to close them. It's like just an absolute, utterly like mismanagement of like a corporation. And I'm just glad that I think Gearbox is the one that is also being considered to being sold off. And I'm glad that instead of being closed, for them to like improve like weird stuff like cash flow and stuff, that I'm glad that they're finding ways to like divest, and a lot of these studios can be saved, because they sold a lot of these studios a bill of goods to be like, yeah, we're gonna buy you to give you like some safety, and look what has been happening. It's like Embracer is an absolute cancer, like an absolute cancer of what's been happening with like the industry consolidation, and the worst example of what happens when you gobble up too much without no plan. This should be a cautionary tale to Microsoft, that as they have grown their operation to 30 plus developers, and they still don't have their shit together when it comes to getting a consistent like flow of games. So if they want to like keep buying more, this should be kind of like, yeah, this is what happens when you do that much. So, and kind of like, at least to just stay within the Saber Interactive like sell-off, just remember that when the KOTOR remake was removed from Aspyr, it was then given to just Saber Interactive proper to keep doing that game. So we got an update on that remake. Story number 3 by Tom Ivan, also from BGC. Embracer suggests Star Wars KOTOR remake isn't coming out for over a year. It says a AAA game based on a major license needs some deep love and respect. On Thursday, Embracer Group announced plans to sell off a large part of Saber. We already read that. The group, which is home to multiple studios and projects, in a deal that could be worth up to $500 million. While Embracer will retain Aspyr Media, the studio originally enlisted to make the Knights of the Old Republic remake, the game is going with Saber, according to Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, who previously reported that the company had taken over development. Nevertheless, when the deal closes and Embracer and Saber part ways, KOTOR is expected to be a jointly held asset between the companies. In today's announcement of the deal, Embracer said its retained assets, including 2 joint projects with the buyer, include a previously announced AAA game based on a major license. In a conference call discussing the deal, Embracer CEO Lars Wingforth was quizzed about the jointly held AAA project on a couple of occasions. One analyst asked if it was expected to come out in the next 12 months or whether it was a more distant release. No, I think that kind of game needs some deep love and respect. So without giving full color, I think it's some time left until that is released, Wingforth said. The next questioner said they thought it's fair to say that the AAA game in question is the KOTOR remake. Is that the case, and who will be in charge of it, because I think it was transferred to Saber, they asked. Wingforth responded by saying he had no further comments on the licensed game. Billed as a collaboration between Aspyr and production partners Lucasfilm Games and Sony Interactive Entertainment, the game was announced as a timed PS5 console exclusive during a PlayStation Showcase event in September 2021. But the remake has reportedly been beset by problems over the last couple of years. Bloomberg claimed last summer that Aspyr had stopped working on the game and that the future of the title was up in the air. Embracer had earlier confirmed that Saber Interactive was also working on the game, and some of Bloomberg's sources said they believed it was possible Saber had taken over development of the project entirely. So, I still don't fully believe that this game is just gonna come out and is gonna be good, what they would have wanted, especially with going from being the thing that opened that PlayStation Showcase back in September 2021. That's a legendary showcase for us here at the X-Bottom, because we reacted to that one when Paul was coming back from sheltering in place from his from Hurricane Ida. So he like after Hurricane Ida passed, and he was kind of like he came out of shelter. He went to buy some groceries, and he sped back home just to be able to react to that. And this was the first game that was shown at that showcase. So it's like, to me, it's just sad because I've held off from fully playing KOTOR, because this is a game I know about. I know about the twist. I know how beloved it is in Western RPG territories. And just knowing that it could be like a better, more modern version of that game to experience that story always held me off. And I'm like, should I just play the Xbox version, or really just hope that Saber, which is technically a much better steward of their projects that they do compared to Aspyr, as we've been seeing them just collapse under their own weight, will they be able to do this right? And I'm like, I want to remain hopeful that just the fact that they're still co-jointly like making this thing, even though they're no longer part of Embracer, but Embracer still has kind of like some of the publishing rights for this thing. I'm like, I will remain forever skeptical, because as we know, like if you're a Star Wars fan, when it comes to games, you always have to remain skeptical. It's rare for us to get wins, and every win we get in the gaming sphere always comes with asterisks, kind of like the Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, the games that I love. Buggy messes. That's a monkey's paw. So, and that's our block of the BGC news. Now we're moving over to the Game Informer side of the news, and we're gonna start with one that made me really, really, really sad. And this happened around the time of the State of the Union of the United States last week. And it's so funny that it's like this had more like this was trending higher than the freaking like State of the Union of the United States. But that just goes to show you there's the impact of this man. So, story number 4 by Marcus Stewart over at Game Informer. Akira Toriyama, creator of Dragon Ball, has passed away. Famed manga artist and Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama has passed away. He was 68. The news was broken early this morning in a public letter by Toriyama's manga studio, Bird Studio. Bird revealed in a letter posted on the official Dragon Ball X account that Toriyama died on March 1st of acute subdural hematoma. A private funeral service was held, and the studio has asked fans to respect the privacy of Toriyama's family. You can read the full letter below. Dear friends, we're deeply saddened to inform you that manga creator Akira Toriyama passed away on March 1st due to subdural hematoma. He was an age of 68. It's our deep regret that he still had several works in the middle of creation with great enthusiasm. Also, he would have had many more things to achieve. However, he has left many manga titles and works of art to this world. Thanks to the support of so many people around the world, he has been able to continue his creative activities for over 45 years. We hope that Akira Toriyama's unique world of creation continues to be loved by everyone for a long time to come. We inform you this sad news with gratefulness for your kindness during this lifetime. Funeral service was held with his family and very few relatives. Following his wishes for tranquility, we respectfully inform you that we will not accept flowers, condolences, gifts, babysitting offerings, and others. Also, we ask you to refrain from conducting interviews with his family. Future plan for commemorate gathering is not decided. We will let you know when it's confirmed. We deeply thank you for your understanding and support as always. Akira Toriyama was born in 1955 and became a manga artist at 23. Primarily known for his works in Weekly Shonen Jump for works such as Dr. Slump, his biggest claim to fame would be Dragon Ball. First published in 1983, Dragon Ball would explode into a cultural phenomenon, spawning a massively popular multimedia franchise with multiple manga volumes, a successful long-running anime, several films, and a litany of merchandise. Dragon Ball has become one of the most influential mangas of all time, and would also become a massive fixture in video games with dozens of titles across a variety of platforms. Upcoming games based on Toriyama's work include Dragon Ball Sparkling Zero, the next entry in the Budokai Tenkaichi series, and Sandland, an action RPG launching on April 26 based on his 2000 manga. Toriyama would also lend his distinct art style to video games such as the Dragon Quest series, Chrono Trigger, and Blue Dragon. 6 years ago, Game Informer editors Kurt and Informer got together to talk about Toriyama's influence on the game industry. You can go watch that video over at the article that they posted. This hit like a truck because I remember like how I got into Dragon Ball was in January 2001. For people that know, if you want to like look at history, that January 2001, especially January 13, El Salvador suffered one of its worst earthquakes ever that destroyed like a lot of towns like in massive like mountainous areas of the land, and it put us kind of like in a shelter in place where we had to be like sleeping in garages and not in houses in case of aftershocks that could like bring houses down. During that time, like I couldn't watch much other than like TV that would air through antenna TV like outside. And one of the around that time, that's when I really connected with a lot of anime stuff. Because before that, like my first anime that I connected with was Pokemon, and around that time, like I connected with Digimon Year One. Like that's when I got to see a lot of it. But then the one that I really connected with around that time was in our channel 2 or channel 4, one of those two. They were airing the initial arc of Dragon Ball, The one where, like, where Goku dies and Gohan has to be taken care of by Piccolo and training and all that, and then Goku's like running through the skies and all that. Is like, I remember that so vividly as my introduction to Dragon Ball, and just like his art style seeping into my mind. That even though like I then became like more irregular when I would watch Dragon Ball afterwards, like those initial like that initial arc, like it seeped so in my mind as like what I would look for entertainment like around such a dark period of uncertainty. And I was just like 6 years old. I was gonna turn 7 or no, I think I was 7 years old. I was gonna turn 8 that year, and just seeing just how influential his art style has been, where you see so much of what he's done be like so reflected everywhere. Like, to me it's just funny, like, because I got this news while I was playing Rebirth, and it was tough to me to look at Cloud, because if you look back at Cloud, especially like Cloud from the original Final Fantasy VII, like his character model is clearly inspired by Gohan when he has like the yellow hair. So it's like you cannot understate the influence this man has had, to the point that everyone around the world, governments, were like sending his their condolences. Our government here in El Salvador was like even made like an official writing to commemorate Toriyama, because like people can't underestimate how much Goku is like a folk legend here in Latin America. It's like Dragon Ball is like it's seeped into culture. Like a Japanese anime feels like a local thing with how influential it was. Like, and seeing his influences, things like Dragon Quest, like that kind of like the blue monster for Dragon Quest, the slime. It's like his art style is just so warm. It just feels so warm and inviting and cute and like peaceful, even though a lot of the stories that happens are so wild that we lost a lot with his death. And Sandland, the action RPG that's coming in April 26th, like I already was interested because it's like it looked interesting already enough. Basically, it was on the art style alone, just being Toriyama. I was like, okay, you have my attention, and I heard really good things from people previewed this at SGF. Now with Akira's passing, I was like, that game has newfound weight for me. That game, Sandland launches the same day as Stellar Blade. I'm gonna get both. I was when they announced that Stellar Blade was also coming on the 26th, I was like, will this be like my priority? But no, I'm like, I'm gonna equally prioritize Sandland and Stellar Blade, like in honor of Toriyama, because like his influence is undeniable, and the world is darker with him gone, and all his work will forever be like living in everyone that grew up in it. And I'm so glad that we'll still have a few more of his works that he had in progress to still enjoy like the joys that he gave to the world. So rest in peace, Akira Toriyama. So now with less sad news, but kind of like at least just more hopeful news. Story number 5. Former Star Wars Jedi Survivor director forms new studio, Giant Skull, to create action-adventure gaming on Unreal Engine 5. Story by Wesley LeBlanc and Game Informer. Former Star Wars Jedi Survivor director Stig Asmussen has revealed Giant Skull, a new AAA studio developing action-adventure games. Prior to directing Survivor and its predecessor, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Asmussen worked as the director of God of War 3 and art director of God of War 2 at Sony Santa Monica. He left Star Wars Jedi developer Respawn Entertainment in September. Giant Skull is headquartered in Los Angeles, but will feature remote developers from around the world. The Giant Skull studio culture is focused on creativity and curiosity, Asmussen, who is CEO of the new studio, writes in a press release. We have assembled a talented team renowned for immersive storytelling, heroic combat, and exhilarating traversal, and our goal is to craft a rich universe that players will want to lose themselves in for years to come. According to the press release, Giant Skull is a AAA studio dedicated to building gameplay-driven, story-immersive action-adventure games set in captivating worlds. Considering Asmussen's work in franchises like Star Wars Jedi and God of War, this sounds like he's taking that expertise to create a new intellectual property. Music to my ears. Other developers at Giant Skull include Chief Technology Officer John Carr, who was the technical director in Jedi Survivor, art director Patrick Murphy, whose resume includes art director on Fortnite and Valorant, lead producer Lauren McLemmer, who was a lead producer on Fortnite, and designer director Jeff Muggarts, who previously handled design on Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order. Giant Skull's animation director is Brian Campbell, who was a founding member of the Fortnite team at Epic Games and then an animation director there. And the studio's chief operating and financial officer is Anthony Scott, who has experience running teams such as Rocksteady Studios. our value for the studio to translate into how we make our games and our relationship with players, autonomy, momentum, curiosity, and respect. Scott writes in the press release, "We want players to join us in every step of this amazing journey as we pave the way for our upcoming game. We're creating something special and have been fortunate enough to assemble an incredible team of developers who are extremely passionate and experienced in creating genre-defining, third-person action-adventure games. Giant Skull is currently developing its first game in Unreal Engine 5 right now, and it will be a AAA single-player focused action-adventure game. Alongside today's news, the studio's website is now live, and it features an endless amount of possible commands to input into a special terminal to unlock secrets and more." So, really exciting stuff for me with this one, because there's nothing more that I enjoy that right now, as everything is just like so horrible with like all the layoffs happening and people losing their jobs. Always one of the silver linings that happens when you have such downturn when it comes to people like just leaving the studios, established studios and all that, is like there's always the hope that is that something gets born out of that misery to build the next bigger and better teams, or at least the smaller teams that could eventually grow big, and have like new people like enter the fray, and that they can do stuff outside studio environments that are so volatile and so risk averse, because they're like handling stuff at such high numbers that they have to like mitigate risk with something safe. And it's clear to me that what Stig wanted to get out of the EA culture, that people do forget about this, but Jedi Fallen Order originally was not a Star Wars game. They were making something original with those same systems, a Dark Souls style adventure game with like the hybrid of like the different games that all came together from like the Uncharted, Tomb Raiders, God of Wars, and all of that. And then when the Star Wars license kind of came in, jury's still out if they decided to be like, yeah, let's can the original idea and let's work on a Star Wars game, or that's what's kind of mandated under EA's Star Wars like exclusive license at the time. But I feel like fundamentally the Jedi games are so great that how great they are with like the talent that this studio had in display would like grow more if that same talent could be put into something new. I do find it interesting just reading a lot of the people that that Stig has assembled here, that he has a lot of people that worked on Fortnite, and this being an Unreal Engine 5 game, it would be interesting to see if they do like an action adventure style game with an art style that resembles Fortnite a little bit. I could imagine that would help them with like asset creation to make this something quicker. And I wouldn't mind, like, especially me that I went back to Fortnite late last year, is like what they did. There's just something like when just looking exclusively at Fortnite, it's like at least within the Fortnite ecosystem, that there's something palatable about like how that game looks and feels. Especially now more that they've done technological improvements, because remember, I've been one that used to shit on Fortnite a lot because I didn't like how that game felt, and it astounded me that how big that game got, because I just didn't feel that game mechanically was like all that. But I feel like they've gotten really good at mechanical feel now, that I feel like it's a legit fun game to play now. And anything like that's outside just a third-person shooter of them doing like an action adventure game, like I would take it. Especially like what I love sometimes with these new studios is getting like the good talent from somewhere else and seeing if all of that talent can come together and do something new outside the studio structure. So I'll be very curious to see if they can nail this, because I also have to like address the elephant in the room. Known talent or proven talent that has gone away from the studio system and done their own studio and put out their stuff, that usually is not a recipe for immediate success. In fact, the Callisto Protocol, Glenn Schofield, he created Dead Space. He worked on Dead Space. He wasn't there under EA. He created Striking Distance Studios. It's kind of like let's make a studio to make the games that EA is refusing to make. We're gonna take the spirit of Dead Space, and that game kind of whiffed it. So it was like they were not able to recapture Lightning twice. So it's to be, and it's like. It sucks when that happens, because it's like you would want that, like what you were known for, to still be as good as what you were known for when you do it again, or do it like outside kind of like an established property. And I think we need more examples of that working. And so far, it feels there's equal misses than hits. And I would have to try to look a list to see what could be considered a hit of something that has happened there. And all the best for Stig. I love Stig. I love God of War 3, even though like in my recent replays, I think I liked it the least out of like all the God of Wars that I did when I was replaying them back in 2002, but there's still something so excellent about that. And he was the art director of God of War 2, and God of War 2 is still, in the eyes of many people, the best God of War game ever. And that was like he and Stig help with art director there, alongside Cory Barlog's direction. Even though I love the Norse games, obviously I've cooled off more on the God of War Norse Norse middle these later days. I still think they're excellent games, but obviously kind of like I mentioned time and place of God of War 2018 being the thing that re-energized my love for games when it did it. Even though like looking back to it, it's like I love it, but I feel there's games that does some of the stuff that game does better. So I've even said it that I feel the Jedi games, if they were more polished, I feel you see the no frills version of the God of War 2018 and Ragnarok games in the Jedi games. So in a way, like I prefer the Jedi games in specific from that specific angle, but the God of War games are just more polished. And obviously, under the Sony umbrella, they had that kind of Sony budget on it. So all the best to you, Stig. I love your work. Jedi Survivor was my favorite licensed game from last year. Sorry, Spider-Man 2. So, and now to conclude the news section of this week's episode, before we move to quick headlines, we got a pair of Final Fantasy 16 news bites that came out from a interview Wesley LeBlanc did with director Naoki Yoshida. So the first of the stories, the first of those two stories, story number 6. Final Fantasy 16, the possibility of more DLC is not zero, but you really shouldn't expect more. So, while speaking to Final Fantasy 16 producer Naoki Yoshida and Square Enix's Tokyo, Japan offices last year for Game Informer's cover story in the game, he told Wesley LeBlanc there was currently no plans for DLC. However, a few months after the game's June release during the Game Awards 2023, Square Enix revealed Final Fantasy 16 would be getting 2 DLCs, which one of those, the first one, Echoes of the Fallen, launched immediately during the announcement. So that one was a combat-centered DLC released that same night. The second one, The Rising Tide, is a more expansive story-focused DLC about the Leviathan icon, curiously missing from the main game. While we still don't know when to expect this Rising Tide other than this spring, they spoke to Yoshida and DLC director Takeo Kujiraoka about what players can expect and more, and then they did a preview of that last week. We're not going to read that one. So, Wesley LeBlanc also asked if he has the duo known as Creative Business Unit 3 within Square Enix, is if there is more interested in more DLC for 16. After all, the recent Echoes of the Fallen and the Rising Tide exists because, after seeing that positive reception for the game, the positive comments from fans towards the world of Final Fantasy 16 towards Valistia, they felt good that was a good opportunity to revisit the game, Yoshida told them. While Yoshida won't say never, leaving the door just ever so slightly open, players probably shouldn't expect more DLC for Final Fantasy 16. That's a difficult question, Yoshida said through a translator when asked about more DLC. My honest answer is, I don't know at the moment, but at the same time, the possibility isn't entirely zero. I don't want to bar out any real possibilities at this time. The reason being is that we did spend a lot of effort and time creating this game, and we put a lot of cutting edge technology into this game. And because of that, we were able to gain a lot of experience, a lot of learnings that we can possibly apply to our next project or title. So my honest feeling is that the team does want to take on a new challenge and move on to a different project. Maybe it's a completely new game. Perhaps it's a completely new form of entertainment. I feel like ultimately that might be the best route for not just the players, but for us as well too. But again, to reiterate, the possibility of more DLC content for Final Fantasy 16 is not zero. And there you have it. It's as Wesley said, is a big fan of Final Fantasy 16, who did both the cover story and the review for Game Informer. He said, I love another reason to revisit this world. I'd take more DLC, a sequel, or even movie tie-in. Final Fantasy VII Adult Children, to be honest. But my takeaway from this interview is the team is ready to move on, and I can also respect that. And I also feel that. It's like, I understand why Naoki Yoshida would say that there's no 0% to saying that no more FF16, because they did mention back when this game was coming out, we have no plans for DLC. It was like to kind of like counteract what happened with 15, that DLC was like announced before the game even came out, and that was like announced, and then when you played the original version of 15, was to see that, oh, this game kind of feels incomplete in its base release, and it took until the Royal Edition and all that DLC being out for 15 to feel like a complete game. And obviously we all know that 15 was like a really tortured game for Square Enix. How long that game took, moving from Final Fantasy Versus 13, announced originally in 2006, and then a full-on project reboot and rename back in 2013 into becoming the 15th main entry, and then how a lot of that game, as initially revealed in 2006, a lot of that didn't make it to the game, but there were still like some whiffs of that original vision still in 15. But then like you see a lot of the original vision of Versus 13 like show up in a game like Kingdom Hearts 3. So it's like the Nomura spite of him saying like, I may not have gotten to do my Versus 13, but hell yeah, I'm gonna try to put the things that I wanted to do with the Versus game into Kingdom Hearts. But yeah, with 16 they wanted to prove, yeah, no, we had a better production for this game. We're like a more we were more responsible on how we developed this game, so we wanted to deliver a full experience, so there's no plan for DLC. And then suddenly they announced that, yeah, we're gonna do 2 pieces of DLC, and they revealed that at the Game Awards. I did review Echoes of the Fallen over for season game. I kind of gave it an 8. It was a fun 3-4 hours to go back to FF16, which was my favorite game of 2023. Not the best game. I think the best games were Zelda and Baldur's Gate and Alan Wake 2, but my favorite, the one that stuck with me the longest that year, were the highs of that game. And that combat-centric DLC was like an amalgamation of everything that game did right and everything it did wrong. The pacing's still wonky. It's like, now, especially me playing through Rebirth, who, even though that can feel padded at times, like the pacing of Rebirth is so much better than 16. I feel now that I would want to revisit 16 now and get a feel for that, because I mentioned it in my review back in June, where I gave it a 9. The pacing of that thing can be good to really wonky to bad. It's like that's why I said like the highs of that game were so incredibly high. It prepped up the whole package and made you forget about the low lows. So I wonder how Rising Tide will go. And it's coming out this spring. It would be funny if I finish Rebirth and then they solidify when Rising Tide is coming in, because I still have 16 installed. I plan on platinum that game. I've been like wanting a reason to revisit it on the New Game Plus Final Fantasy difficulty, but then knowing that the DLC was coming, I was like, I'll wait as my excuse, because I still love that game. I hate how a lot of people have used the Rebirth release as an attempt to really pit both games against each other, and I will say it outright, like, I think Rebirth is a better game than Final Fantasy 16. I like it more. But I feel that also doesn't take away from the fact that Final Fantasy 16 was also a really great game for me. So you can love both people while still acknowledging one is better than the other, but just because one is better doesn't mean the other one's trash. So, and staying on the Final Fantasy 16 train, this is for the PC people. Final story for the news by also Wesley LeBlanc. Final Fantasy 16 PC version in final stages of optimization. Expected demo before release. Final Fantasy 16 exclusively hit PlayStation 5 last June. However, Square Enix had already revealed a PC version of the action game was in development. They revealed that at the at PAX East or PAX West. Yeah, the one at Seattle. And see, I'm gonna say this was written by Wesley LeBlanc, so I know when he says hi. When I spoke to producer Naoki Yoshida about it in Square Enix's Tokyo, Japan offices for Game Informer's Final Fantasy 16 cover story last year, he said players shouldn't expect the PC version anytime soon. With FF16's first DLC, Echoes of the Fallen, already out, and his second DLC, The Rising Tide, due out this spring, I spoke to Yoshida once more about the PC version. I also talked to him and DLC director Takeo Kujiwara about The Rising Tide and what players can expect, and you can read the exclusive preview over there at IGN, at Game Informer. While Yoshida is unable to share when the PC version of 16 will be released, he says the team is in the last stages of optimization. In terms of where we are in development currently, we're trying to figure out the final stages of optimization right now, Yoshida tells me through a translator. When we can release the PC version might be dependent on that, the system requirements and specifications for PC that players will need, so we're trying to figure that out. Naturally, the PC specifications are looking to be somewhat high. I believe that. He says players can rest assured, though, that development on the PC version of FF16 is going smoothly, but in terms of when it's going to come out or when we can announce it, I'd like to ask for more time on that. Yoshida tells me before FF16 releases on PC, the team will do its best to announce the best specifications and requirements ahead of time so players can determine if the game will run on their PCs. And to do that, we're looking to release a demo for the PC version as well, he adds. Again, we can't really talk about too much in terms of detail of when it's going to come out. I think in a little more time, we'll be in a better place to announce things. But one thing's for sure, it won't be too distant in the future, it won't be a year, it won't be 2 years, it will probably be shorter than that, so stay tuned. So, the one area is like sticking on the comparison between FF16 and Rebirth, that I'm gonna give it the edge to 16 is that at least visually, I feel 16 is definitely more impressive because it like handles scale at such magnitude. That also helps because that game is more segmented. It's not an open world. I feel like Rebirth is definitely very impressive with its like visuals, like considering how big that world is, how seamless the open world is, even though there's some Unreal Engine 4 stink in some of the textures that don't load or that they load in and out or are more lower resolution than the others. And of course there's the problem with the performance mode on Rebirth, where the game is like really, they locked in on having a really great frame rate compared to 16 that was like more up and down and only felt locked during combat, but at the expense of more blurriness. That is like, it's more pronounced if you know how that game looks in 4K. Visually, 16 looked close together, at least in my eyes, from its performance mode to its like quality mode, but the performance was just like so janky, and it was always like exploring the world. I was like, I'd rather stay in the 30 FPS mode here because it's like the frame is already kind of lowering there, so it's like it's only in the combat, so I might as well look how pretty this thing is. We can remember FF16 is a really pretty game, especially in the big scale. I believe when they said that the specifications and requirements for the PC version of that thing will be high, especially for the people that will love this thing to run at like a locked 60. It's a joke that FF16 on some PS5s was overheating some consoles with like the icon battles, because that's the thing, like those things are just so graphically impressive that it doesn't surprise me that that was happening in some consoles. I can't wait to see how that puts a workout on the PC version, and I would love to know like what would be required to run that thing like a really high resolution and at a hopefully locked performance. So for the people, for the PC elitists out there. So, and also I can't wait to see what how they mod that game. I would love to see if they're able to mod Cloud instead of Clive, especially since you already can do the Buster Sword, because they announced you could like transmog the Buster Sword through the DLC, and I played with that Buster Sword when I returned for Echoes of the Fallen. So, yep, great game. I can't wait for the PC people to try it so they can see that despite how great Rebirth is, 16 is also really good. So. And that ends the news block of this week, but there's a ton of headlines that I just wanted to at least go through real quick for people of interest. So, headline number one. This year's Summer Game Fest streams live on June 7th. So Jeff Keighley already announced like when we can expect his next showcase for Summer Game Fest. So that's gonna be on June 7th. Let's see if we get other showcases around that time, like we did last year. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown gets new story DLC, modes, trials, and more this year. So it's so funny. It's like this is a no frill single player experience from Ubisoft, but they announced like a content roadmap for it, where they're gonna do like all these additions that are gonna be free. That remind me a lot of the Metroid Dread editions that came out after that game's release. And then they announced that that thing is getting new story DLC. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's my favorite Prince of Persia game. I still prefer the Sands of Time trilogy, but as a revival for that series, as a Metroidvania, I feel like that thing hit more than it didn't. It was one of Ubisoft's best games in years, which doesn't say much considering they've been like a middling, swimming in sevens kind of company recently, and like their wins have been like slower, but at least like it's like them slowly eking themselves back into relevancy after like all their bad moves they did post 2020, post like all the purging that happened with the sexual harassment, like not a lawsuit, but the things that got unearthed during mid 2020 and all the people that they lost. So let's see. I wonder how expensive that DLC will be, and I wonder how much they'll do it. But there's a style to that game, and some of its design is so great as a Metroidvania that it's still one of the best Metroidvanias that I played. It's just not my favorite Prince of Persia, but more to play with that game, I'll take it. And right now it's on sale, weirdly, of course, like always with a Ubisoft game. It only took 2 months, but you can go buy that game for $30 at your digital storefront of choice. I think it was on PlayStation for $30. I think it's also on Xbox. But also on Xbox, you can pay for the subscription for Ubisoft Plus, and you can kind of get the digital deluxe edition version for your subscription version. So it's a really great game. I think it's still one of the better games that I played early this year, but it's one of those games that the more the year fills up, I can see kind of like slipping out of my list and just being like an honorable mention, but I can't like I can't stress enough, it's still a really great game. So it was still really great. I can't wait to see what else they do with Prince of Persia. When is that remake coming out, Ubisoft, for Sands of Time? The one you announced like 4 years ago. And you moved over to Ubisoft Montreal. Another headline, Multiverses is back in action this May 28th. It's so funny. The Multiverses, the game that it's WB's version of Smash Brothers that kind of caught the world by storm that summer. Kind of like was really popular at the time. And then like they did kind of like it was technically in beta, but that didn't prevent them from doing 2 seasons worth of beta content. But the second season, the player counts plummeted, so they had to kind of they were like, oh yeah, because we're in beta, we're like taking it down, even though you could spend money of it, and be like, we're now gonna build it we're gonna build like what's gonna be like the full game release, and that's coming later. And now 2 years later, this thing is resurfacing. I was kind of reading around, they rebuilt the game on Unreal Engine 5, and they're gonna include more maps and more characters. So let's see if they didn't prematurely kill their momentum by doing that, or they can get a new lease on live. I know WB wants to just double down on live services. This was definitely one of them. I would love for this one to be the one that hits, because that's kind of like what I've been saying, that I would want for them to really like understand that they can do single player stuff and not everything has to be a live service, but definitely have one that is successful and that can like fill up your coffers. And that way you can still do more games like Hogwarts Legacy. I mean, the numbers are there. Hogwarts Legacy, 23 million copies sold. Suicide Squad, one of the biggest financial disasters of this year. It's so hilarious that they then had to go to an investors meeting and said that they want to double down on live service stuff when they had the examples. But WB under David Zaslav, the biggest idiot in existence, greediest idiot in existence. Like, what else is more surprising? So, but yeah, Multiverse is back in May 28th. Let's see if it's still free to play stuff. And I hope that they honor all the things people bought of that game during beta. If not, that's gonna be real scummy. Then we got a few headlines that happened during a surprise mini video Nintendo put out for Mario Day last Sunday. So the things announced there. Headline number 1: new Super Mario Bros. Animated movie announced for 2026 release. So they're gonna take 3 years to do a sequel to the super successful Mario movie from last year. Excited for that. That was a fun movie. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door release they set for May 23rd. So I got one of my May games now. Paper Mario: Thousand Year Door is freaking excellent. One of my favorite all-time favorite GameCube games, alongside the 2 Zelda games and Mario Sunshine, Luigi's Mansion. It was just such an excellent Mario RPG for that one. Such a hilarious game. Such a great memories playing this game in 2004 to 2005. I got this game for Christmas in 2004. I still have my copy. I've been wanting to replay it, but then when they announced they're doing this remaster, I was like, I'll wait. It's another one of those GameCube games, as we're slowly built up to them only having the Zelda games that they haven't put out into the Switch. I want to believe in the bottom of my heart that they're gonna break out that Wind Waker or Twilight Princess in case of emergency to fill up this year, because Switch 2 is next year. So, and then Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, the port for the 3DS game from 2013, screams onto Nintendo Switch on June 27th. So at least I have 2 Switch games to look forward to in both May and June. I know a lot of people were like screaming that Luigi's Mansion 2 was $60, but I would have to double check. Let me see, Luigi's Mansion 2 eShop, Mansion 2 eShop, because I know the physical version was gonna be $60, and I want to see if it's also gonna be the digital version. It's loading. My internet is being real slow. Yeah, it's also $60 in digital, but what else would you expect from Nintendo? I would say that it is so funny that the 3DS remake/remaster is a $60 thing, when Metroid Prime Remastered, one of Nintendo's most impressive like ports/remasters that I've ever seen, was $40. So they are really unpredictable. But maybe they know that everything Mario or Luigi related, that they can sell for $60. So yeah, that's on June 27th. And then 3 Mario spin-offs that came out on Game Boy and Game Boy Color, Dr. Mario, Mario Golf, and Mario Tennis, are coming it came to the Nintendo Switch Online Game Boy catalog this past Tuesday on March 12th. So you can go try that if you subscribe. That's for the $20 tier. one day, one of these Mario days, are gonna bring Mario Galaxy 2 back. Mario Galaxy 2 is in that Nintendo pocket for me of the Wind Waker Twilight Princess of like, just put it out. Like, don't ignore these games. You have pretty much everything except these. So, damn you, Nintendo. I love you so much, but you frustrate me to no end. Then Akuma comes to Street Fighter 6 this spring. If you still play Street Fighter 6, you get a character in Akuma. I've long fallen off from that game, but I know it's still pretty popular in like hardcore fighting game communities. I just know Tekken 6 is Tekken 8 is the big one this year. So, Final Fantasy X's theme song to Sun Arcane wasn't originally intended for the game. This is a funny headline because apparently like Uematsu was mentioning that he made that theme song for something else that then was not, that it was then no longer used, and then like Square Enix like asked for like a theme for Final Fantasy X and he used this one. And it's just so funny how this leftover song from another project he used for Final Fantasy X, and a lot of fans tell that this is one of the everyone's favorite all-time new Uematsu themes for the series. I still intend to finish in Final Fantasy 8, 10, and 12 as the missing links of what I'm missing for the series. So I can't wait to see that, especially because I know Final Fantasy X is always such an interesting one because I know of people that adore it and of people that hate it. But I also know people that adore 8 and hate 8. So Final Fantasy is just that kind of series. You're always going to have people that love and equally hate every entry because everything's so different. So the System Shock remake hits PlayStation and Xbox on May 30th. I think it's already available on PC and it was pretty good. So I'm glad a game that's like the game that you can see its lineage on BioShock. Like you get to see those origins now also on console. And I heard that System Shock remake was really good. So glad it's coming on. And also another game for May. I'm glad May is filling up. New PlayStation 5 update enhances DualSense audio, share screen, and more. That more I would say is like you can like now edit the brightness of the light that comes out of your console. And as for the DualSense audio, I tell you because I've been playing Rebirth, and you hear a lot of Chately's audio as you enable it through the controller speaker. I could hear the difference. Chately sound real loud now, after this patch. So if it sounds too annoying for you, just lower the volume. You can go to the options for that. Sabotage teases Sea of Stars 3-player co-op mode as game surpasses 5 million players. So they're gonna patch a 3-player co-op mode to the excellent Sea of Stars RPG from last year. I can't wait to see how that works. That's another game that I need to go back to. I know Eric from Season Gamer reviewed it and he loved it. So, and that's the one that I was wanting to go in when I was like in my turn-based mood when I was going through the pixel remasters for Final Fantasy. But it's like time. Sometimes there's not much time to play all of this, but I still have it installed. And the brief thing that I played with Sea of Stars, it looked excellent. And then Sony is rolling out another temporary PS5 Slim price cut in Europe. I know I saw yesterday that there were gonna be some bundles in some, like I think either in Best Buy or Walmart's, that the Slim with Spider-Man 2 was $399.99. I was like, that's such a great deal for like the Slim version of that system that has technically more memory than the launch one that I have, and includes Spider-Man 2, a game that now has its New Game Plus included, so the game feels a little bit more complete now. And I can say that playing through the early parts of Spider-Man 2, it silver bulleted a lot of the buggy parts that I experienced back with that game back at launch, and also when I revisited earlier this year. So I was still kind of like, do I want to play this again? Am I wrong of calling it one of the biggest disappointments of last year, even though it was still an honorable mention? But playing through the New Game Plus for Spider-Man 2, play early parts, I'm like, some of the early parts that I still don't like. I hate the overindulgent walking and talkings of that early game, but the Sandman battle is a masterclass, and it was so fun going through that early parts with the Venom powers at ultimate difficulty. Is like I wish New Game Plus, I still say, it's bittersweet. Had New Game Plus been at launch, and while I still was kind of like high on that game, I think I would have had a better opinion. It's like my disappointment with that, I've said it over and over and over, is like they left me, because I had, even more than Paul, I had a buggier experience with Spider-Man 2 than he did. He's usually the one that has buggier experiences than me. Had I not been left to stew on, gosh, why was this so buggy for me? Man, why did I platinum this thing in 22 hours? Was this like, this was like I spent less time with this game. Like New Game Plus is taking forever to arrive. Then the leaks with the budget I'm like, how does this game cost so much when it barely looks that much better? Even though there are parts that do look much better than the original, but it's not like a overall improved thing. And gosh, and then like learning that Insomniac became like a Marvel studio for the next decade was like it just added to the disappointment. Even though objectively speaking, I think what they still did a great game, but there was even a leak from the leaks that have been happening. Like oh crap, I didn't even mention about the Spider-Man: The Great Web, that multiplayer game leaked this weekend. It wasn't in the news sections. It's funny, when I was looking at it, they didn't report on it. But yes, like the multiplayer game that you could have been able to play as Fight Spider-Man with the multiverse things. That's what that was a game they canceled. It actually, I think, could have been really fun, all things considered. Like because it's like it's rare to have like a multiplayer Spider-Man game where a lot of people could be like swinging around and solving crimes together. But hey, they did cancel it because if Factions cancellation was an indication of like if that Great Web would have come out and they would needed to support it because of Sony's live service initiative, if what that meant was Insomniac would then have to like just dedicate all resources to be like a live service studio, they did a right choice. Though, just add it to Spider-Man 2. Put the work you put in as an added value. Like, do the Ghost of Tsushima Legends thing. Not a live service, it's just an added value item element to that original meaty game. And just be like, yeah, this is just a fun stuff. Just put it out there. Don't leave all that work to waste. Especially since it's clear, now more than ever, that the Spider-Bot side quest was teasing this. So, that was the multiverse connection of that game. So, yep, enough of Spider-Man 2. Those are all the enough of all the quick highlights. That was this week's meaty news segment. Because that's what happens when Paul is not here. So now I get to do his stuff. The 2024 releases for March 17th to March 23rd. Hades, the Game of the Year winner for many outlets in 2020, comes to iOS on March 19th. Hi-Fi Rush, the PS5 version, comes to March 19th. Comes to PS5 on March 19th. Lightyear Frontier comes to Xbox Series X and S and PC on March 19th. MLB The Show 24 comes to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch on March 19th. And once again, there's going to be a Game Pass version of that game. So, Alone in the Dark 2024, the horror game that got delayed last year from October, comes out on March 20th for PS5, Series X, and PC. I still think that game would have been better served on October, but maybe they could have delayed it to this October, but who knows? Maybe it's good. Call of Duty Warzone Mobile comes to iOS and Android on March 21st, so this is the official release of Warzone. I think that's been like on beta for forever. So now, like Xbox fans, you finally get all of this. You've been asking for it. Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, Endwalker, Heavensward, Shadowsbringers, and Stormblood. So the main Final Fantasy XIV game and all its expansions arrive on Xbox Series X and S on March 21st. Horizon Forbidden West, the PC version, comes out on March 21st. Midnight Ghost Hunt comes out on PC on March 21st. Dragon's Dogma 2 comes to PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PC on March 22nd. Princess Peach Showtime comes out on March 22nd on the Switch. And Rise of the Ronin, also a PS5 exclusive, also on March 22nd. And Madison comes to PSVR 2 on March 23rd. What a week for March. This is insane. That's quite the release week. And I mentioned that I am going to go back to Final Fantasy XIV. I think I owe it to that game, especially knowing that the 16 team did it, and a lot of people like preach the gospel of Heavensward, Stormblood, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker. So I'm definitely going to see all that content through, especially now that I'm a really big Final Fantasy guy. And hey, at least the Xbox people get to try it out. I really want to see if I can connect my account to Xbox, because I know there's like a starter pack that they're going to give for Game Pass people, but I think they have to buy the game, but I will see. I already own it. Already told that story. I screwed myself from the free trial by buying everything because it was like getting all that content for $40 was too tempting. But now if I want to play it on PlayStation, I have to pay the subscription money. So I have to commit. But I have to look for the right time to commit for that one. And just push through A Realm Reborn. And it's so funny. Horizon Forbidden was releasing the same day as, or the day before Dragon's Dogma 2 and Rise of the Ronin. And they're like, why is Horizon always so cursed to release on that? And Dragon's Dogma 2, people, that's definitely going to be the biggest one that week, according to just the chatter that I'm seeing online. I am seeing Elden Ring-like chatter of this game, that this could be huge. I not expecting it, I'm gonna temper my expectations, but like, I don't expect 10 out of 10s out of Dragon's Dogma 2. Though if that ends up happening, I wouldn't be surprised, just based on the chatter and the hype that I'm seeing of that thing built, especially with that demo that they released for the character creator, with all the insane stuff that's happening. And all this insane stuff that people are building, like Bully Maguire, Timothée Chalamet, hideous Pikachu. Like, it's insane that it allows for that. I know Paul is going to make Dante, which is going to be funny because this is the game from the Devil May Cry director. So, and with that, people, that concludes this week's episode of the X-Bot. And thank you so much for tuning in for my second solo effort for the X-Bot. And I think this one even better than I was expecting, considering like the last time was my first time doing it solo. Now that Paul has announced that once his baby, his wife's baby is born, he's definitely like gonna be like a more completely absent guest from the show for like a couple months. So either I'm gonna find out a lot of those guests, or I'm gonna have to do a lot of solo work as I wait for him to come back. But hey, even better for me, because I know like a lot of YouTubers know how to do solo stuff, and it takes effort to do that. So you can find me at _Josegovia on Twitter /X. You can find also some of my you can find me on Threads /Instagram at Alejandro Segovia 93. And then you can find my written content currently at seasongaming.com, and some written stuff over at my own website, thecriticalcorner.com. And you can go read my recent reviews over at seasongaming.com, which include The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, and Skull and Bones. And pretty soon, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I don't know what will be my next review after that, but we'll definitely see. I have enjoyed more the games that I reviewed early this year way more than I did last year, what I started with Forspoken. So, and then Lightfall, and also Metroid Prime Remaster, kind of like in between there. So, thank you so much, people. Like, enjoy now that daylight savings is a thing. Hopefully, enjoy the extra sun that if you love your sunlight. I know a lot of people are still lamenting losing an hour of sleep. I feel that, even though I didn't. We don't have daylight savings in El Salvador. In fact, like daylight savings, I love the time because it pushes down when I can play my digital games that I've preloaded. So I don't have to wait until 11 o'clock. I can play them at 10 now. So I can play a bunch of games much earlier now, at least until November when daylight savings strike again. But until then, people, keep enjoying all the games that have been releasing. Hopefully, you're also playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Again, look forward to our spoiler cast next week. And until then, press X to play. Hasta la vista, baby.